Hi, my name is Brittany J Jones. In this video, I will be showing you how to stitch a baby hem, also known as a designer hem, and you may have even heard it referred to as a very narrow hem. This type of hem is mostly used in more of your delicate, lightweight fabrics. Think of chiffon, organza, even some satins and charmeuses. This will be a beautiful way to finish off the hem. The designer hem, it can be kind of tricky, but I'm going to share 2 tips that I hope will allow you to be able to sew yours with a little bit of ease. Tip number 1 is to make sure that you are using the proper needle. For fabrics like chiffons and organzas, you want to make sure that you're using a fine, thin, and sharp needle. Tip number 2 is to make sure that you are using some sharp cutting tools. I do recommend cutting with a rotary cutter, a fresh blade if you have it. If not, make sure that you have some sharp shears. Tip number 3, apply a little bit of tissue paper right above your feed dog and between the fabric. That will help you to be able to start your stitch without your fabric getting stuck down in the feed dog. Now that we've gone over the tips, let's get started with the video. To demonstrate a baby narrow hem or a designer hem, I'm going to be using this piece of fabric here. However, like I mentioned previously, you will most likely see this type of hem done on delicate fabrics. Maybe you have a chiffon that you're working on, or charmeuse, a satin, maybe even some organza. The first thing that you want to do is go ahead and press up 1/4 inch along your hem. Now, I do find it helpful to have just a little bit more fabric because we have to stitch really close to this fold, and then we also have to trim off the excess fabric here. It makes it a lot easier to trim if you have something to kind of hold on to while you're trimming away. However, you do want to keep in mind your hem allowance if you do fold up a little bit more than 1/4 inch. After you have your 1/4 inch folded up along your hemline, now we can go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch close to the fold. This is probably going to be about 1/8 inch stitch. Let's go ahead and do that now. Again, we're going to be sewing really close to the fold. So once you have it lined up, I'm going to drop down my needle first, like so. Since this is done on really delicate, lightweight fabrics, I do not recommend backstitching at this point because once we have this sewn, we're going to trim down and then fold this over and sew it again. And when you sew it again, we can just overlap our stitches as opposed to backstitching. Now that we have stitched close to the fold, so your first stitch will look like this. Again, we pressed up 1/4 inch and we have stitched really close to the fold. Now we need to trim away this excess fabric. So grab some really sharp shears and let's go ahead and trim. Be careful though not to cut your stitch. Once you have all of the excess fabric trimmed away, now we go back to the sewing machine and we fold over this stitch and we stitch directly on top of our previous stitch. Let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, here's a closer look at my baby narrow hem, also known as a designer hem. After you have it sewn, you want to go ahead and give it a press. And also remember to press it after your first stitch, the one where we folded up 1/4 inch. After you have that one stitched, press it as well. And then after you have your final stitch in, do one final press. Once you have it all pressed, you are all done with your baby narrow hem.